I knew something was wrong the night my wife handed me that warm cup of chamomile tea and watched me drink it the way someone watches a lock click shut. For weeks, I woke up dazed, bruised, missing hours of my life like they'd been carved out with a scalpel. But nothing prepared me for what I saw when I finally dumped the tea down the sink and pretended to be unconscious. When she slipped back into the bedroom wearing latex gloves and carrying that black medical bag, I realized the woman I loved wasn't watching over me. She was preparing me. And what she did to my body while she thought I was asleep made my blood turn to ice. My name is Keaton Vale, and this is the night I learned that the danger wasn't outside my home, it was lying in bed right beside me. Before I share my story, I want to know you are here with me. Just say, listening in the comments, or tell me where you are. I love hearing how far my story reaches. Sometimes even the smallest connection can make a story feel heard. Thank you. And now, here's my story. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. It helps more people find these stories, and it lets me know I'm not speaking into the dark alone. I'm Keaton, and this is what really happened. I always thought our home in Portland was too quiet for its own good. Maybe that's why I noticed the smallest shift in the air before I even understood what it meant. Our place was a 2-story wooden house tucked against the edge of Forest Park, surrounded by damp pine trees and the kind of silence that made you hear your own heartbeat at night. I worked from home as a remote software developer, spending most of my days in the upstairs office, while my wife Serafina Cade came and went on her constant work trips, selling medical imaging equipment. To anyone else, we were the picture of a calm, stable marriage. But looking back, I realized the signs were already there, small polished edges hiding something sharp underneath. I've always been more sensitive than I let on. After a car accident at 25, loud noises, sudden changes, even shifts in energy around me triggered a lingering wired alertness. Because of that, I'm used to questioning myself, second-guessing my instincts, telling myself I'm imagining things. But not even my tendency to overthink could explain why I started waking up every morning feeling like someone had switched off my brain during the night. It began slowly, a deep sleep that didn't feel restful. A heavy drop into unconsciousness instead of drifting. Then the disorientation in the mornings, my mind foggy, my limbs weak, my memory blank at the edges. At first I blamed my workload. But then I started noticing details I couldn't write off as stress. My watch would show up on the wrong side of the nightstand. My phone, a device I guarded fiercely, appeared under the bed one morning as if someone had tossed it aside. My wedding ring was once on the wrong finger. And one day I woke up to find my sleep shirt twisted strangely around me, the hem snipped in a small precise cut as if tested by a pair of sharp scissors. That was the moment the first crack formed in the version of reality I'd been clinging to. I told myself there had to be an explanation, but when I tried to retrace my steps the night before, everything dissolved into that same blank fog. Then came the night that changed everything. Rain hammered against the bedroom window, one of those cold Portland storms that swallowed the entire neighborhood in mist. I half woke to the creak of our bedroom door opening. Through barely parted eyelids, I saw Sarah's silhouette glide out into the hallway. She was holding a black bag, the kind that looked like a compact medical kit. I knew that bag. I had seen it only once before. When I asked her about it, she said it was just for personal items. But at 2 a.m, she carried it with a sense of purpose that sent a cold tremor up my spine. When she slipped back into the room, she paused for a second too long. I felt her gaze rest on me, measuring, almost evaluating something. I forced my breathing to stay steady, pretending to be deeper asleep than I was. Her expression was unreadable in the dim yellow light from the hallway. By the time she got into bed beside me, a realization had begun to take shape, one I was terrified to acknowledge. I started to question whether I was safe when I closed my eyes, whether sleep, once a refuge, had become a place where I was most vulnerable. The sense that something was happening to me while I was unconscious would not leave my mind. Over the next several days, I considered confronting her, but part of me still clung to the hope that I was mistaken, that my trauma was distorting my perception. Instead, I turned inward, trying to observe my own life like a stranger analyzing clues. I began waking up slowly and keeping notes, how I felt, what I remembered, anything out of place. And then the first undeniable piece of evidence arrived. My younger brother Lyle called one morning while I was still groggy. He's a nurse who works rotating hospital shifts, so he's used to my odd hours. But that day his voice sounded uneasy. He asked if I was okay, saying I had called him the night before around 11. According to him, I spoke incoherently slurred monotone, barely stringing thoughts together. I had no memory of making that call. None. Not a single fragment. Something deep inside me tightened when I realized I couldn't distinguish between what I had actually done and what someone else might have done with my body while I was unconscious. That morning, as I hung up with Lyle, I walked through the house with an unease so sharp it felt physical. Every shadow looked like a hiding place for something I'd overlooked. Every object seemed slightly displaced, as if I were walking through a room someone else had arranged. I wanted so badly to believe Sarah loved me the way she always said she did. But that phone call, that blank void in my own mind, became the first anchor for a new, terrifying possibility. I didn't have answers yet, but I had a question that refused to leave. Was Sarah putting something in my tea? I didn't confront her. I didn't have proof. I only had a growing fear one I carried with me as night fell again. When the hallway light cast that soft, familiar glow against the floorboards, I felt something shift in me. It was the moment I understood that trust, once cracked, changes the shape of everything around it. And in that yellow light, the same one that had once felt like home, all I felt was dread. The night after Lyle's phone call, I tested my first theory. When Sarah handed me my usual cup of chamomile tea, I pressed a hand to my stomach and told her I felt nauseous. She paused just long enough for me to notice a flicker in her eyes, then nodded lightly and said she hoped I'd sleep well anyway. I went to bed without drinking a drop. For the first time in weeks, I drifted into a normal sleep, no sudden heaviness, no hard plunge into a black void. When I woke the next morning, I felt clear-headed, sharper than I had in months. No lost memories, no grogginess. That clarity made the pattern too obvious to ignore. So I kept tracing it. On nights when Sarah traveled out of state for work, Seattle, Boise, Spokane, I slept peacefully. On nights she was home and brought me tea, I slipped into that same unnatural, dreamless abyss. At first I told myself it was coincidence, but I started comparing her work calendar with my notes and the match was undeniable. My body's responses weren't random. They followed her presence like a shadow. The next test came a week later. I told her I wanted to make the tea myself. Sarah's reaction was subtle but unmistakable. She laughed, said she liked taking care of me, that it was her little nightly ritual. But her smile stretched too tight. Her voice thinned. And when she turned to reach for the kettle, I saw her shoulders stiffen with something close to fear or irritation. I couldn't tell. I only knew it wasn't nothing. As I watched her that night, I realized I'd stopped seeing my wife as just my wife. I was beginning to watch her like someone collecting evidence. The next evening I pushed further. I said I'd forgotten my tea on the coffee table and stepped out of the room. When I returned, Sarah was standing in front of the cup, her hand hovering near it. She jerked slightly when she saw me. Her expression smoothed over instantly, almost too instantly. She said she thought she heard the TV volume glitch and came to check it. I played along, pretending not to notice how unnatural the explanation sounded. When she went upstairs, I lifted the cup and sniffed it. Beneath the floral sweetness, there was a strange metallic tinge. Not strong enough to identify, but strong enough to make my pulse race. That was when I knew I had to search for something more concrete. Waiting for another sign wasn't enough. I needed answers, real ones. One afternoon when Sarah claimed she had a late client meeting, I slipped into her home office. It was immaculate, almost sterile. Notebooks alphabetized, files stacked perfectly. No dust, no clutter. It felt curated, like a room meant to look used but not actually lived in. Inside the drawer of her desk, tucked under a stack of marketing brochures, I found a single business card, Northwest Sleep Research Foundation. The name sounded vaguely familiar, so I checked the date at the bottom corner, an address and phone number that had been crossed out. The foundation had been shut down for 5 years. I looked closer and felt my stomach drop. Someone had scribbled in pen, KV, Tier 2 next week. My initials. My name. I didn't know what Tier 2 meant, but the handwriting was undeniably hers, precise, slanted, elegant. The same handwriting she used on grocery lists and holiday cards. For a moment, the air around me felt different, like the world shifted 1 inch to the left. The silence in the house pressed against my ears. I could hear my pulse pounding. I wasn't imagining things. I wasn't overthinking. I wasn't traumatized or paranoid. Something was happening to me. Something Sarah didn't want me to know. I left her office exactly the way I found it. But as I walked back into the hallway, I realized the house had never felt quieter or more wrong. Every creak, every breath, every shadow felt staged, manipulated deliberately still. Like someone had pressed pause on the world. And standing there, surrounded by that suffocating quiet, I knew one thing for certain. Whatever Sarah was doing, I had only scratched the surface. And I needed to go deeper before she moved me into whatever Tier 2 really meant. I didn't wait long before testing just how far Sarah's secret life extended beyond our home. One morning, I told her I had a client meeting across town, kissed her goodbye, and waited until she pulled out of the driveway. Then I followed her car from a distance, letting the morning traffic cloak me. She drove toward downtown Portland, cutting through the fog that clung to the Willamette River before parking near a glass building I knew wasn't her usual workplace. She stepped out looking perfectly put together, hair-pinned-up coat fitted tightly against the cold. Even from across the street, I could tell she was moving with intention. I watched her walk toward 3 people standing near a loading zone. None of them wore badges or uniforms. They didn't look like co-workers. Their clothes were too casual, too mismatched with the polished corporate world Sarah claimed to work in. One of them, an older man with graying hair, handed her a black bag identical to the one I'd seen in our hallway at 2 in the morning. She slipped it under her arm like it was something precious, something she had expected. They exchanged almost no words, only a few nods, the kind of silent communication that wasn't meant to be witnessed. A chill settled behind my ribs as I watched them disperse. Whatever this was, it had nothing to do with selling medical equipment. The older man walked away, first disappearing into an alley like he didn't want anyone tracking where he came from. The other 2 left in separate directions. Sarah got back into her car, expression unchanged, like she'd just completed a routine errand. I returned to my car and tried to breathe through the tightening in my chest. The polished, professional facade I had always associated with her was unraveling fast. This wasn't a work meeting. It wasn't even a side job. It felt like stepping into the outer edge of something organized, something hidden beneath the ordinary world. When I drove out of the parking garage, a gray SUV slipped behind me. At first I thought it was a coincidence, but when I made 2 turns that had no reason behind them except instinct, the SUV mirrored both. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. I pressed further into downtown, darting into a narrow side street, hoping to shake them. When I emerged on the other end, the SUV was gone. But the feeling it left clinging to the back of my neck stayed with me the entire drive home. As soon as I stepped into the house, the silence felt wrong again. I opened the laptop on the kitchen counter and looked up the organization printed on the business card I had found days earlier, Northwest Sleep Research Foundation. A string of old articles popped up, each more disturbing than the last. They had once conducted clinical trials related to deep sedation response. Their founder, Dr. Halden Pierce, had been stripped of his medical license after allegations of unethical experiments. Before authorities could question him further, he disappeared. My pulse thudded when I opened a scanned newspaper article. It detailed the closure of the foundation after 3 test subjects vanished without explanation. Someone had attached an image of the lab. In the corner, barely noticeable unless you were looking for it, sat the same kind of medical kit Sarah carried around our house at night. The room spun for a moment. None of this was random. None of it was a misunderstanding. Somewhere without my knowing, I'd been placed on a trajectory that mirrored those disappeared subjects. And the words scribbled on the business card, KV, Tier 2. Next week burned hotter in my mind than ever. I wasn't imagining being part of a process. I was already inside it. I knew then that my next step would be the most dangerous one. If I wanted answers, I needed to see with my own eyes what happened when Sarah thought I was unconscious. Whatever she was part of, whatever she was doing to me in the dark, I had to witness it myself. The next time she brought me tea, I wouldn't drink it. I would pretend, and I would watch. I prepared more carefully than I ever had in my life. When Sarah handed me my nightly tea, she watched me take the cup with the same quiet focus she'd had for weeks. I lifted it to my lips, feeling the warmth against my face, then waited until she turned down the hallway before slipping into the bathroom and pouring every drop down the sink. I rinsed the cup until no trace of the scent remained, my hands trembling as I placed it on the bedside table exactly the way I always did. Then I lay down on the bed, forcing myself to breathe slow and deep and let my body go slack. The hardest part was keeping my eyelids still. My heart hammered so violently against my ribs I was sure she would see it through my skin. But when I heard her footsteps on the stairs, I sank deeper into the mattress and let everything about me mimic the version of myself she expected a man too sedated to know anything was happening to him. The door opened. Light from the hallway spilled across the room. I felt her presence at the edge of the bed before I saw anything. Through the narrowest crack between my lashes, I watched her unzip the black medical bag. She pulled out purple gloves, a miniature camera, a small tripod, each movement precise and automatic. The soft yellow glow of the bedside lamp illuminated her face, but it wasn't the face I knew. Her eyes were cold, detached, analyzing me with the calm of someone inspecting an object rather than a person. She lifted my arm and let it fall. I forced my muscles to stay loose. Then she traced 2 fingers across my jaw, checking for tension. My breath stayed steady, only because I had practiced for hours earlier that day. She set up the tripod at the foot of the bed and attached the small camera, adjusting the angle until it faced me perfectly. Then she opened her laptop and typed something. The screen filled with small chat windows. A notification flashed, ready for session 12. I felt my stomach drop. Whatever this was, it wasn't just her. There were others watching, waiting, expecting something from her. From me. Sarah leaned in and adjusted my head, tilting it slightly to expose more of my neck. She shifted my arm over my stomach, then tugged the collar of my shirt aside to reveal skin. She moved me as easily as someone repositioning a mannequin, never hesitating. She took dozens of photos from different angles. Then she pulled out a sterile swab and brushed it across my collarbone, my wrist, and just beneath my jawline, sealing each swab in a labeled plastic pouch. A new message popped up on her laptop. Username Pierce Alpha. A request followed: collect sample B and check his pulse stability. The name struck me like ice. Dr. Pierce, the missing founder of the Shuttered Sleep Foundation. The one tied to vanished research subjects. My mind raced, but my body stayed still. Sarah followed the instructions without a word, pressing 2 fingers against my neck, watching the numbers on her device. When she reached for her bag again, she pulled out a black leather notebook. She flipped it open and wrote something quickly. As she turned the page, I caught a glimpse of a line written in her elegant handwriting: Keaton Vale, tier progression almost final. My entire body went cold. I understood then that this wasn't random, nor was it temporary. I was being moved through stages towards something with a defined end. She closed the notebook and exhaled softly as if satisfied. Then she leaned down and brushed her lips against my forehead with a tenderness that felt grotesquely out of place. Her whisper pressed against my skin. Just a few more nights. She packed everything into her bag, shut off the camera, and slipped out of the room. I waited, counting the seconds, until I heard the front door open and her car pull away from the driveway. Only then did I open my eyes. For the first time in weeks, my mind was crystal clear, sharpened by fear and a rising urgency. I sat up in the darkness of our bedroom, surrounded by the faint smell of lavender from the sheets she had chosen, and understood that whatever she had planned for me, I had very little time to stop it. I was already inside their process, and if I didn't act now, I wouldn't make it to the end of it alive. The moment Sarah's car disappeared down the street, I tore through the house with an urgency I had never felt before. Every drawer, every cabinet, every shelf became a possible hiding place for answers. I searched her office, the linen closet, even the storage space in the garage. Nothing explained the nights she'd been drugging me. Nothing connected directly to the chilling process she had performed while believing I was unconscious. But then I looked under the bed. Something metallic reflected the dim light. I pulled out a small steel lockbox heavy enough to be meaningful. It required a combination. I closed my eyes, let my mind run through possibilities, and entered our wedding date. The lock clicked open instantly. My stomach twisted at how easily it yielded to something so personal. Inside was a thin laptop I had never seen, along with neatly organized envelopes and plastic evidence bags. I powered the laptop on, and the breath was stolen from my chest. Hundreds of videos filled the screen, my sleeping body in different positions, taken on different nights. My face slack, my body limp, completely unaware of what was happening around me. The timestamps went back months. My hands shook as I opened another folder. This one contained images of people I didn't know. Men and women of different ages, all photographed the same way, unconscious positioned, documented. Some folders were labeled Tier 1, others Tier 2, and a few marked Tier Final. When I clicked into one of the final folders, my mouth went dry. The bodies looked thinner, weaker, with medical tubing taped to their skin, empty eyes, expressionless faces. Then I found my folder. Tier 3, active. A sinking dread spread through me. Inside a single note. Keaton has begun to suspect. Accelerate timeline. I kept scrolling, desperate for any piece that made sense, but every discovery twisted the knot tighter. There were transaction logs showing cryptocurrency payments routed to 3 different addresses: Seattle, Spokane, Phoenix. There were account names associated with live stream sessions, many marked with timestamps matching nights I remembered nothing about. Each transaction carried an alarming sum of money, more than anything one person could feasibly manage alone. Sarah wasn't a lone participant. She was part of something wide-structured and well-funded. Then I opened a folder labeled Sites. A series of photos appeared: warehouses, storage units, rural cabins. One picture stopped me cold: a wooden cabin surrounded by dense trees, unmistakably from Hood River. Beneath it a caption read, Facility 2. Prepare for final tier. My hands trembled as I realized what that meant. That cabin wasn't a storage site. It was where victims were taken when their progression was nearing completion. A place where people vanished. As I tried to steady myself, a noise outside snapped me back to the moment. I rushed to the window and peered through the blinds. That same gray SUV, the one that had followed me in downtown Portland, had parked in front of my house. It idled there, silent, for 20 seconds. The driver didn't step out. He didn't roll down a window. The SUV simply sat there like it was confirming something. Then it drove away. I swallowed hard, every muscle tense. They were watching. Not just Sarah, others. Others who had been waiting for my next move. When I returned to the bedroom, I noticed a loose panel on the baseboard near the closet. I pried it open, revealing a small SSD tucked behind the wood. I plugged it into the laptop. What filled the screen made every hair on my arms rise. Detailed documents, case numbers, maps, and a list titled Confirmed Transitions. 18 names. 18 people who had disappeared across several states. Next to each name was a code. Tier Final. Near the bottom was a name I recognized, someone from Eugene. A patient Lyle had treated months earlier. I remembered my brother mentioning someone brought into the ER late at night in a chemically sedated state, only to vanish before morning. It all connected. Too perfectly. Too horribly. I closed the laptop and looked around the bedroom I had shared with Sarah for years. It didn't feel like mine anymore. It felt like a crime scene. A cage. A place where I had been stripped of pieces of myself without ever knowing. There was no version of this I could handle alone. Not anymore. I needed help from someone who could confront danger without freezing. Someone who had seen the darker sides of the world firsthand. There was only one person who fit that description. Rowan Hawk, my retired Marine neighbor. I grabbed the SSD, the laptop, and whatever courage I had left. It was time to bring someone else into my nightmare. I knocked on Rowan's door just as dawn broke over the tops of the trees. He answered wearing an old flannel shirt, his expression shifting instantly when he saw the panic in my eyes. I told him everything: my deep sleeps, the tampered tea, the videos, the logging of live streams, the tier system. I expected disbelief, or at least confusion. Instead, he put a firm hand on my shoulder and said, I knew something was off. He led me inside, poured me black coffee, and sat across from me with the steady composure of someone who had seen too many things to be surprised anymore. As I spoke, he nodded slowly, his jaw tightening. When I finished, he told me something that chilled me further. For weeks, he had seen unfamiliar cars pulling up to my house late at night. people entering and leaving while Sarah was away. Then he described a night he would never forget. Sarah had led a man out of my house, someone unsteady on his feet, moving like he was partially unconscious. When Rowan approached her to ask what was going on, she smiled and said the man was part of a sleep study she was supervising. Her tone had been too smooth, too rehearsed. Hearing it from him made the pieces in my mind shift into place with terrifying clarity. I called Lyle next. He arrived an hour later, still in scrubs from an overnight shift. His face pale when he saw the evidence I'd collected. When I showed him the list of missing individuals, he froze at one name. The man from Eugene, the one transported to his ER in a state of unexplained sedation, was on the list. Lyle remembered him, remembered trying to stabilize him, remembered that he vanished before the transfer team arrived. And worse, Lyle recognized a symbol drawn in one of Sarah's notebooks. He had seen the same marking in a patient file that had been flagged for anomalous sedation levels. That file had been part of an internal hospital investigation that never went anywhere. The realization hit him like a physical blow. Sarah had been at his hospital. Not as a visitor, not as a wife, as part of her network. By then, the weight of what I had uncovered was too big for us to carry alone. I contacted Detective Amara Ruiz, a specialist in cases involving chemical sedation and trafficking networks. I expected her to ask me to calm down, tell me I was misinterpreting things. But when she saw the SSD's contents, names, photos, the tier system, the live stream transaction logs, her face hardened. "This isn't local," she said quietly. "This is federal." She alerted the FBI and instructed me not to deviate from my routine. The smallest break could tip Sarah off and trigger her to disappear with me. Ruiz sent agents to the cabin in Hood River. They found restraints bolted to the floor, medical tubing, and a camera rig pointed at a cot. It wasn't a living space, it was a holding site, a waypoint. Victims brought there were on the brink of whatever the network defined as tier final. When Ruiz returned with the report, she didn't sugarcoat anything. "You have 48 hours, she said. Maybe less. Sarah is accelerating your timeline. She knows you're getting harder to control." My mouth went dry. "So what do I do?" "You act normal," she answered. "You drink the tea but secretly dump it. You sleep when she expects you to. You keep your patterns consistent. We'll have agents positioned nearby, but you must not alert her." As she talked, she walked through my living room and froze. Hidden behind the leaves of a potted plant, nearly invisible unless you were looking for it, was a small camera. Not one of hers. One of theirs. They were watching me from inside my home, monitoring my movements. Ruiz exhaled sharply. "They're studying you, tracking your behavior. Every deviation matters," which meant I could not make a single wrong move. Ruiz laid out the plan. She would set a trap inside my bedroom, the same room where Sarah had recorded and cataloged me for months. Agents would remain nearby, waiting for Sarah to initiate her nightly session. The moment she reached the point where she believed I was fully sedated, the agents would move in. But it all hinged on one thing: my performance. I had to act like the same compliant, unconscious subject Sarah believed I had always been. Because the moment she sensed something different, she would take me. And if she succeeded, I knew I would never return home again. The hours before nightfall felt unbearably slow. Ruiz and the federal team filled my home with silent surveillance cameras inside vents, microphones under the bed, pressure sensors behind door frames. By the time they finished, my bedroom looked the same as always, but I could feel the tension humming inside its walls. Ruiz slipped a micro-transmitter beneath my undershirt and reminded me, act normal, no deviations. Any hint of change and Sarah would know. I reset the room exactly the way she liked it, even smoothing the sheets the way she always did before climbing into bed. When she walked through the door at 6:40 p.m., she appeared warm, smiling, carrying lilies and takeout. Her voice was light, affectionate, almost too affectionate, as she asked about my day. But behind the smile, I could feel her evaluating me, waiting for a slip. Her gaze dipped toward my hands. She studied them carefully, as if checking for something I shouldn't have: an adhesive from a wire, a mark from installation work. I kept still. Her slow smile afterward felt like a warning. She went to the kitchen to make my nightly tea, staying longer than usual. When she returned, she placed the cup before me with practiced precision. I lifted it, tipped it enough for the warmth to brush my lips, and let the tea slide down the outside of the cup when she turned away. I set it down at the same angle I always did. We exchanged a few more empty words before heading upstairs. There she changed into her work attire, the fitted dress, her hair tied up tightly. When she spoke next, her tone was flat and clinical. "I'll check the room temperature." It was her signal. I lay in bed, body limp, breath slow. The house seemed to shrink into silence. When she returned with the black medical bag, the air turned cold. She set up the tripod, the camera, the laptop. But this time she checked my pulse with a medical monitor, watching the numbers until she believed I was fully under. She adjusted the lighting, angled it to frame me perfectly. On her laptop, a window opened. Finalization process initiated. A man's voice came through the speakers. "Bring him to the cabin once the sedation stabilizes." My blood froze. This was the night I was meant to disappear. Sarah positioned my arms, lifted my head, exposed my neck. She laid out straps and syringes beside me, her movements careful and practiced. Her whisper brushed my cheek. "I'm sorry. This is the only way things stay quiet." She took my arm and steadied the needle. At that moment, Ruiz's voice cracked through the comms go. Lights exploded through the room. Agents charged in, shouting, knocking the syringe from her hand. Sarah stepped back but didn't fight. She looked at me, still pretending to sleep, and said with a soft, eerie certainty, "You'll never understand all of it." They cuffed her, but the small, calm laugh she released sent a shiver through the entire team. Ruiz shut down the live stream, discovering it had been broadcasting to 3 servers overseas. Even with Sarah in custody, the network she worked for was still very much alive. At the federal office, Sarah refused most questions. She sat still, composed, saying only I was just an operator. Those words were enough to confirm she wasn't acting alone. Using her seized equipment, agents traced 3 major servers across Seattle, Spokane, and Phoenix, tied to livestream clients and handlers from multiple states. Ruiz asked me to help identify victims from the SSD. Several faces were familiar from Sarah's files. One of them, the missing man from Eugene, hit Lyle hard. He remembered treating the man months ago before he vanished from the hospital. Lyle blamed himself, but I reminded him none of us stood a chance against something designed to operate behind silence and science. FBI and DHS launched coordinated raids. 12 individuals tied to the network were arrested. The cabin in Hood River was sealed. Investigators found restraints, chemical traces, and evidence of at least 6 victims who had been processed there. A few were found alive, deeply traumatized. Others had simply disappeared. During the data review, Ruiz uncovered a coded document referencing Facility 3, an unknown site. My initials were listed under an upcoming transport schedule. If Sarah hadn't been stopped, I would have been taken there within a day. The reality of how close I came to vanishing hit me like a blow to the chest. Before her sentencing, I met Sarah one last time. She looked at me without emotion and said, "The final tier isn't death. It's transition. You broke the sequence, you should be grateful." Ruiz stood beside me, troubled by the implication that other orchestrators were still free. Sarah received life without parole. Other captured participants faced severe federal charges. Still, several of the names in the decoded files were missing, and the investigation remained open. I moved in with Lyle in Eugene while I recovered. Therapy helped me walk through the aftershocks, nightmares, fear of sleeping, the strange sensation of being watched even in daylight. With time, I met 3 other survivors rescued during the raids. Together, we formed a support group, a small circle of people who understood what it meant to lose control of your own body and mind. Months later, using my programming skills, I built a system that monitored online platforms for signs of sedation-related trafficking. I developed public guides, worked with nonprofits, and partnered with federal agencies to warn others about the dangers we never saw coming. Then one quiet morning, an unmarked envelope arrived. Inside was a photo of a cabin I had never seen. On the back were typed words, "Facility 3 is still active. You are not safe." I stepped outside, staring at the gray Oregon sky as the wind pushed through the trees. Fear stirred again, but this time it wasn't the same fear that once trapped me. This time it sparked something stronger. I had survived the darkness inside my own home. I had broken the process meant to consume me. And even if the network wasn't gone, I wasn't helpless anymore. Whatever came next, I would face it awake, no longer a passive subject in someone else's plan, but a survivor determined to keep others from falling into the same shadows.